Welcome to the Extraordinary Podcast, where we identify God's uncommon work in common life. Recognizing God's work requires intentionality, but articulating it motivates and inspires. Don't forget to subscribe to never miss an episode. In today's episode, I have a conversation with Austin and Gabbie Kemper, where they share about their life and how they became enmeshed in the church and they grew in Jesus, but also how they processed and tried to heal from the loss of their son Jasper. It was difficult, and there's no easy answers, but they share their experience and how Jesus has helped them. So let's get into the conversation today. Austin and Gabbie, thank you for being guests on our podcast. We appreciate you taking time to share with us a little bit. And as we begin, both of you attended the Mount Pleasant Christian School. Can you share a little bit about your experience, what you liked, and just some of your experience there?
Well, it was great for me. I went there for 12 years, and I wouldn't want to go to any other school. I lived in Missouri at the time, so it was a 45-minute drive one way. So I had a lot of free time before and after school. I usually did all my homework in that drive. So.
I did not want to do the Christian school at all. I think I was 11 when we started going. We were in the same class, started in 6th grade, and we went on and graduated high school. It was better, I think, after the first 6 months of doing it, but I just had a really hard time adjusting to it at first, especially since I was homeschooled by my mom, and then she was going to become my teacher again in a whole new level. But I think it went well, and it was necessary.
And you two met each other there, so obviously some positive. Yeah. I mean, that's a great takeaway, if nothing else. Now, can you share just a little bit about the jobs that you each have and what you like about them?
So for me, I work for the United States Postal Service. And what I love about my job is that I get to sit in a vehicle for 6 hours a day usually and just be by myself. So I have like a whole list of podcasts I listen to, and I just go through them. I do try to do different things because I get bored listening to the same thing over and over again. I listened for years to like news and just political stuff, and I got really bored of that very quickly. So what I'm going through right now is like the Living Waters podcast, the Bible Project, and I started listening to audio versions of the Bible, try to do at least one book a day. And I recently discovered that Spotify has Christian audiobooks like the Pilgrim's Progress or stuff from like Charles Spurgeon, and I'm like, I've never done that before, so I plan on doing that maybe next month.
I will be working in the ER Mount Pleasant as an emergency nurse. That's what I'll be doing.
That's a recent change, correct?
Yeah, I'm switching jobs currently for more time at home with family. So I'll be working with my mama in the ER.
That's nice. A much more convenient commute for you. So that's be a good new venture for you. But you've been an RN for 4 years.
I've been a registered nurse for 3 years. I graduated in 2020. I've bounced around from a couple different hospitals.
Now you guys have had various pets, and you know, could you share a little bit about your pets? There's some uniqueness with this.
I was hoping one of them would maybe join us for this, but I don't think any of them will. We've got Ryder. He is our Newfoundland lab mix. He turned 9 years old this August. He's my baby. He's not really Austin's baby. I picked him. We were dropping Levi off at college his freshman year, and I was walking into a PetSmart, my family was out antiquing, and I hate antiquing. So I went down the strip mall and I saw that there was a PetSmart, and I wanted to go in and look at some betta fish. And I was thinking about maybe I'll get myself like a betta fish and keep it in a cup until we go home tomorrow, and it'll be great. And then we did a, hang on, I'm sorry, my notes. Such a dork. There was actually a shelter sale for all kinds of dogs in the area shelter. So there were puppies, poodles, corgis, all beautiful, eager babies ready to be adopted. And I immediately noticed this huge black older dog right away. He was the one dog that like no one was playing with or noticing. So I went right over to him. His foster mom told me he was shy and withdrawn. And he didn't really look all that friendly. He looked just kind of sad. And again, none of the other kids, like everyone was going for the puppies or the really smaller dogs. I was like, I really like this big black one. And I have nothing else to do right now. I mean, my family's out shopping just down the street at some rusty armadillo, I think is what it's called. So I wasn't a fan of it. And, we went up there. I went up and greeted him, and he put his paws on my shoulder, did a big hug. And I took him on a trial walk around the PetSmart, and he actually chased off a snake that I was about to walk on. Yeah, I was like, oh, he rescued me. So then I didn't let anyone know. I just kind of wrote a check for him, and I called Austin in the morning because he wasn't on this trip, and I said I was bringing home a dog for us.
How was the car ride home?
I had to go to Walmart and buy towels, so he didn't actually sit on my mom's shiny leather pleather seat. So, but I don't know. It was just I called him. I was like, I just have to have this dog, and I adopted him. He's from a kill shelter, so he was on day 3, I think he was a day from being euthanized. So his foster mom had rescued him, and then he's been ours for 4 years now, I think.
Mm-hmm. Pretty long.
Yeah. And then we have 3 cats. I've always had cats and dogs growing up. I'm a cat person myself. Austin is not. So we had always talked about, getting a cat when we got our first home, when we were first married in our apartment. We had my childhood cat, Oliver, for a while, but after 15 years of dedicated love and helping me grow up, he passed Christmas of 2020. That was super hard for me. I was 3 months pregnant at the time, and we just never really spoke about getting another cat because Oliver was very sick and kind of hard to care for. And then our first son died. So after that, I think we got Maisie and Mo. They are twin. I call them our meow meow cows. They're the Oreo dairy cow shape and style. They are litter mates. They're twins. So we got those 2, and those have been awesome cats for us. They've been super snuggly. And then we found Queen Julian in an alley behind my parents' house, and she keeps us on our toes and keeps us young. But I mean, she's all right too. So we got 3 cats and a dog.
Yeah, thank you for sharing a little bit about that. I appreciate it. Now, switching gears a little bit, you both grew up in the church and are now adults. And can you share a little bit about what that transition was like, and maybe something that did or something that didn't help you transition to take ownership of, I'm just not a teen or child that attends the church. I'm adult. I'm a contributing person in the church. Can you share a little bit what that was like?
So I didn't grow up going consistently to a church. I went to a couple churches in my life, but they were so infrequent that I don't even remember the names to them. Like, I barely remember the locations. And I went to mostly like vacation Bible schools and some Wednesday night kids groups. But that was basically it. The only Christian influence I really had was going to the Christian school. And when I finally graduated, Gabbie invited me to go to her church, which is B1 Naz. And I eventually, I went by myself, and it was pretty freaky because I've never like went to a church intentionally by myself. So it was like a minute before the service started back then, and I just like snuck in, and I've been going ever since. So.
I switched churches as a teenager when we went to B1 the first time. So I was not thrilled about switching. We had switched schools and now we were switching churches, and we had just moved to Mount Pleasant. And I was just like, I'm really tired of all this. I didn't deal with change very well. But Terry Vance won me over. He could see past the awkward, shy teenager, and he would tell me all the time about the potential I had. So I was like, flattery got him everywhere. I loved Terry, and then I grew to love the church. Transitioning into being an adult of the church, it felt weird. There are some families I've known since I was 15, and now we're on a first name basis with each other, so that's a little wild to me. There's some people I've watched at church for several years, and we're just now getting acquainted with each other. I really regret not branching out sooner with the church because I'm like, it is a great church, and like I've seen these people for about 10 years now, and I'm just now noticing them. One thing I wish I had participated more. I didn't feel like this was my church until I'd been consistently playing in the worship band for about a year, and people would compliment me on my playing, and then I felt like I was contributing to something for someone else's benefit, and then I felt like I was actually helping be a part of something else. And then I also felt like I was belonging when I was helping carry buckets for corn. I felt more connected when I was participating in things with other people, not really for my benefit, but for others. I think that's when I felt ownership of the church.
I think you make a really good point that when you start serving, that's when you take ownership, but also that's when you start kind of seeing the benefit, the value of what we're doing. But kind of as we move in this direction, can you speak to when did you become serious about your relationship with Jesus? And I recognize our spiritual journey has ups and downs and all that kind of stuff. But was there a moment that you can think, this was a time where I really started to get serious about Jesus?
So for me, throughout elementary and middle school, I can probably give you 10 or more specific dates where I said like a prayer to ask Jesus into my life. Many people told me that Jesus died in my place so that I could go to heaven and live for eternity. So I would ask God to come into my life so I could go to heaven and live for eternity. And if no one really explained to me what sin is and what sin was, I would pray to God maybe once a year to save me, and then I would forget about God for the other 365 days of the year. It wasn't until maybe the end of middle school or high school that I became serious about Jesus. And I know exactly where I was when it started. I was on a highway, actually, heading to Quincy, Illinois with my family, when one of my brothers asked me to just listen to a sermon that he was listening to on his iPod. And so I was listening to it, and the guy preaching made just a simple statement that said, Jesus never said to ask him into your heart or to say like a prayer. And I was like, what does that mean? I'm like, because that's what like everybody says. And I never like searched the scriptures or really to verify that. And like the guy said, like an example was like Mark 1:15, where it's Jesus said, repent and believe the gospel. And that was the first time I heard of repentance. And I was like, okay. And I was intrigued. And so I definitely don't believe in like a work salvation, that it's through grace you're saved. And so I was very confused. So that's the day I really like dove deep into really researching and listening to more sermons. And it was from that day on, because it kind of scared me a little bit. I was like, I've been like really relying and trusting in these dates that I've had, and it was just like eye-opening that you can't just think about God like one day and then just live your life as like a sinner. And so it was from that day that really like God really started to like purposely come into my mind, and from that day on, God has somehow interjected Himself into my thought. He's you really need to like think about me, and I was like I've never done that before. God coming into my thoughts was totally foreign, and I've never really. And so that from that day, I can't even tell you that date, but I can have all those other dates written down, and I don't even know when that day was, just where I was at. And so that's kind of how my walk with God started.
I started getting serious about Jesus, I think, when I was 12. We were still at our old church in Fairfield, where, again, there was, I think, 30 people on a good day, and the only people with kids were my family. So they were our Sunday school teachers. Again, there's another part of my life where my parents are my teachers. It's kind of a recurring theme growing up for me. I hated it, but like most things, I'm sure the growing pains were necessary. So again, I've not always enjoyed that, but it was needed back then, and I'm really grateful for that now. They had given the other two kids in the class, which would have been my brothers, and I think this other family that had kids, that they were older, they did come sometimes. They gave us all these little composition notebooks, the fancy ones that cost more than 70 cents. So my mom would never buy us those. She's a bargain lady. But they bought us these composition notebooks, and that's when I knew it was serious. It was like, oh, Dixie bought, she spent more than 70 cents on a notebook. So they showed us how to make a prayer journal out of them using the acronym PACM, PACOM, and you'd make columns like praises, answers, confessions, others, and me. And you'd write a few things down to thank God for. Then you'd thank Him for the answers to your prayers, which is kind of when I started tracking which prayers God was answering and actually seeing that history. Because before, I really had no idea if He was answering them or not. I mean, I was just a kid, so I was like, maybe He is, maybe He's not. But then I was able to kind of look back, yeah, He did answer them. Maybe not in the way you were looking for, but He did answer them. You list your confessions to ask for forgiveness, and then you'd make a list of people or situations to pray for, and then specifically asking God to bless those that were on my heart for that day. And then the final column would be just requests for me. I'd often ask for a heart change, listen to my mom better, not fight so much. I'd pray for my future husband. His name was Mr. Only in my journals. Yeah, it was you. We didn't date at NPCS, so I had no idea I would be marrying one of the two boys in my class at the time. But so that's how I used those journals. I think I filled about 5 or 6 of them growing up, and then I would throw them away. I don't keep them because I feel like those thoughts are kind of between me and God. So they're in a landfill for those who are interested. Depends, I guess, on how if He can go through, He knows which gem to find, and if God really wants to go back and find the hard copy, but I'm sure He knows. I used to try to burn them, and then I set something. I did something. I think I turned it self-alarm on. I did something, smoldered a little bit, paper smoldered, and then some other things caught on fire in the trash can. So Austin banned me from trying to be poetic and burning them. No, I just have to throw them away.
No, but I mean, it's a small thing. You said 70 cents, but that those small things, you never know what it's going to be, but something can make a big difference, and that apparently made a big difference in your life. So thank you for sharing. You mentioned a little bit ago about your first son, Jasper. Can you share about your experience of, as much as you're comfortable, of course, but kind of landing on how did you process that? And I know you're never done processing that, but how have you guys kind of understood what happened and began to heal and put your life back together after that?
Well, for me, I cried for the first couple of days, but that was pretty much all of my mourning. that I did during my process, what helped me was that it is not uncommon thing to happen in my family. So my great grandma had a stillborn a day or two before the due date. So that was rough. I had another grandma that had a son die several days after he was born, and then my own mom had a miscarriage as well. And so it's still hard, but since since I know that this world that we live in is fallen and corrupted by sin, these things do happen. But knowing that doesn't mean it still isn't hard to deal with, because it's still a very important part of your life. And even now, like even though like my mourning process was like early on, even now that Gabbie reminds me, like he would be like 2 years old. I saw somebody do this with their son, and it like that. It's hard when you like imagine like, okay, Jasper would be this old doing these things, and so just trying to cope with that. So that's kind of how I dealt with it.
Yeah, and I'm already tearing up a little bit. So, I mean, I've had several negative experiences in my life. Who hasn't? But Jasper was probably the biggest tragedy in my short life that I've had, and I really hope nothing. I honestly don't know what would top it. I really don't. I was 32 weeks pregnant with our very first baby. Um, my blood pressure kept going high. I was having lots of headaches. I thought I was preeclamptic. We spent 5 hours in the ER on a monitor before, being sent home saying everything was okay. 2 weeks later, I felt like something was off. I hadn't really felt him kick, but it was my first pregnancy, so I didn't really like know what I was looking for. Um, I've had people say, "You're a nurse, you should know these things." And I'm like, there's all kinds of different types of nursing. And I've never done OB nursing, and I have, like, just because I'm a nurse, that does not mean I would know everything. Contrary to popular belief, there's just like, no, I didn't know, and I wasn't aware. And they're like, well, how come you didn't know this? You went to nursing school. I'm like, yeah, I did, but you know how much is getting covered? It's very broad. And honestly, in the moments when you're the patient, you cannot be the nurse at the same time. It's just impossible. So at that time, I was the patient. I had worked all weekend, so I assumed on my walking I kind of rocked him to sleep, or that I was just missing them because I was so busy running around a unit. A few days later, at a regular OB appointment, I found out Jasper no longer had a heartbeat, and he had actually been dead for a while. Um, I had gone to that appointment alone, so that was really hard for me. I just had this doctor who was trying to leave the room as fast as she could, and I grabbed her lab coat. I grabbed the sleeve of it. I just wouldn't let go, and I'm like, "You have to tell me that this gets better. You cannot leave me right now." And I was one of the afternoon appointments, and I think she canceled the rest of her afternoon because she's like, "It does not get better." And she said, "It does not get better. You will never ever recover from this. You will never get past it." And I'm like, "Then what am I supposed to do?" And she's like, "You have to go to the hospital and have him." And I'm like, "Yeah, I know, but what am I going to do after that?" And she's like, "I don't really know. When I had mine, I just had to keep moving." And I'm like, "So you've had one?" And she's like, "Yes." And honestly, I don't know if she was lying to me or not to make me feel better, but she just kind of said, You're never going to get past it. You're never going to get through. You're going to get through it, but you're not going to recover. It does not get better. This is the worst thing. That this is the worst thing, aside from you dying as well, that happened in the unit. It's one of the worst outcomes. And that was really hard to hear, but I do like it when people don't sugarcoat things with me. So I was like, okay, so this is going to be awful. I mean, I already know this, but I'm glad that she's like, no, it's not going to get better. They diagnosed me with maternal vascular malperfusion. We had an autopsy for him to kind of see what was going on. My placenta was too small. It stopped growing sometime during the pregnancy, and it suffocated him. So I was hospitalized, I think, for a few days, and I delivered him. We all held him. We all cried. It was a lot. We left empty-handed. I didn't have anything to hold. I finished his nursery. We got all his clothes hung up and everything, arranged every toy, and then we kind of closed his room for a long time. Just when I couldn't walk past his room, or I couldn't really like look at it, so we would just close it all the time. His room was just really cold all the time. I really remember that. His room was just so cold because we never had heat in there for it. I went on a really huge transitional thing. I'm really impulsive. So after Jasper, after a big major life event like that, I changed so many things. Within a week of Jasper's death, I was texting my boss to let me come back to work. I had a new tattoo. We had adopted our 2 cats, Maisie and Mo, after Austin telling me several times in life that he just wasn't going to be a cat person and didn't want cats. So, and then I had told my hair lady to take my faded blue hair I had back then and make it nice again, surprising with the color. I thought we were going to do like a brown, blonde, caramel look, and I left $400 poor with lime green, purple, pink, and sage-colored hair for his funeral. I wasn't mad at it. I just said, can you surprise me? Can you make it look nice? And so that was all within a week of his death. And then after that, I started school online to get a doctoral degree in nursing, and I took on 2 second and third jobs. I was honestly doing anything to distract myself from the reality that I just did not have a baby to go home to. I was just changing my entire routine and making it so inconvenient, so impossible, just because I wanted to keep busy, and I didn't want to look at the jar of ashes on our table. No one really tells you where to keep your jar of ashes. Nobody. So I mean, it was just on the table next to all the flowers. I just did not know what to do. I eventually quit all my side jobs and just focused on classes and my regular job. I started therapy for probably the 80th time in my life, been on and off therapy. So, I mean, that's just always been like a thing. I just wanted to feel like I was still in power, that his death wasn't going to break me and I could be whole again. I wanted to look strong. I was not. I felt really I felt ignored. I felt isolated from the community of moms who were like, they didn't know really what to say for me or to me. It's just because I really felt like this was directed toward me and not really Austin as a father, but to me as a mother, just because, yes, I did have a baby, but I just do not have a baby to show. And that was really hard for me. I don't know, planning his funeral was really difficult for us. And I think one of the things that helped me was that I was not the only person that has lost a child and had to plan a funeral or had to decide how we were going to memorialize them. And God had willingly sacrificed his own son to die for millions of undeserving heathens such as myself. And I'm not trying to equate Jasper and myself to God and Jesus, but I am saying that I felt like God could relate to me, and he became a safe place for me to tell him all my frustrations and ask him the questions surrounding Jasper. I developed a routine for myself later that was attainable, which was just literally doing classes and going to my one job. Nothing extra. Looking back, I strongly urge those who are in the same painful spot that I was in to please not make any huge major changes like job changes, starting school, moving, after suffering a huge loss. I wish I'd been more grounded in my daily life and stayed solid, but I don't know. I do a lot of changes all the time. That's kind of just how I cope. If I wasn't, like always crying about him, I was either trying to ignore his existence completely. There was a lot of bouts of depression for me, honestly, in and out. I just could not figure it out. One thing that was kind of like a huge help for me was the book of Job. I had lost 1 child, Job had lost 10. If I was reeling from Jasper's loss, I can totally see why Job literally had a 2007 Britney Spears moment and shaved his head. I could see why he had to just sit down and cry, and his wife was like, "You need to just go die." I feel that. I really did. I did not want to continue on. I felt like I should have been gone and Jasper should have lived. I don't know. I've gone through every scenario, honestly, from all of that. And then I've actually been pregnant, 4 times. So I felt the loss again. After a year and a half of trying for another baby, I miscarried in June of 2022, and then a second one in July 2022. And those miscarriages were just as hard as Jasper's death. And I think of all of my 4 of my kids very often. Our son Jesse is the only one who's quite literally made it out alive. And it just solidifies to me how precious life is and what a blessing children are. I'm really thankful God gave me the opportunity to be Jasper's mom and that he did bless me with 3 more children. And honestly, Jesse's got the short end of the stick. His siblings are experiencing perfect parenting right now in a perfect place with their creator, and Jesse's being fed pureed peas.
Thank you for sharing that. It sharing your journey for how you try to deal with this tragedy. It's interesting with anybody to look back on the things you tried. As you said, you started school, you took class, you did other changes that you don't recommend, but when you're going through that, you've got to do something.
Yeah.
And it was all consuming, and I'm sure there are still days where it's all consuming.
Yeah.
And just a couple of things you mentioned. Austin talked about, Jasper would be this old, or you see kids that Jasper be that age, or just the fact of you're a mom who doesn't have a child that you can show. Those are heartbreaking realities that you two had to and continue to have to endure. And one of the things, and I don't know if you have any answers for this, but I'm sure there are a lot of ways that people try to be helpful, and if you could share maybe ways people were helpful, but maybe ways people tried or thought they tried, and I don't know, I just don't want to. If you have any examples of that, I think we can learn from each other, and that can be helpful to us as we try to support each other.
Yeah.
So one thing that I remembered is the people that helped us the most was the people that kind of helped us get back into a routine. Like, for example, many people gave us food, and that is extremely helpful because when you're going through something like this, the last thing you want to do is make food. You want to just order something online and have it delivered, and it's just hard, I feel like, just to get up in the morning and just do basic things. But if people come and just like when they gave us food, it was just extremely helpful because that was just one less thing to worry about, and then we could manage like his funeral or talking to people, like other things that we had to just move forward. And that was extremely helpful. One thing that I remember that was extremely hurtful was someone at my work several months after Jasper died. He came up to me and just like point blank said, is your wife and you over it yet? And I was just I don't even remember what I said, but it's probably a good thing. Because he just said it with no care of what we went through, and he was simply just saying words to just fill the space and just hear his own voice. And he did not care what my answer was. And so like just you'll never really get over this. And even though, like I said earlier, my process, like I cried for the first couple of days, and it really tapered off for me. But I feel like even though like my morning process was quick. It 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 was good for me from that point to try to help my wife with her process. Even though I feel like I did a terrible job trying to relate with her and help her through this.
I think it's different for mom and father.
Yes.
I think it's just different.
Yeah.
Oh, honestly, I think within an hour of Jasper's death, I was actually still sitting in the clinic. They were closing. I hadn't yet gotten up to go to admit myself at the hospital to deliver him. I was just sitting there. I just could not. I did not want to get up. I just sat there. The clinic had been closing, and my phone had actually started. A lot of people have been texting me and calling me, and I'm like, "Oh, how did you even know about this? Because it's not even been an hour." And he's like, "How did you know?" And they're like, "I guess a lot of people have already been talking about it, and like people had already know about it." And I was like, "Okay, I don't want to talk to anybody right now. I can't. I don't owe anyone any explanation at this moment." And people were just like, "Well, what happened?" I'm like, "I don't know. I'm still in it." Like, it was just really the best. The best thing I ever got from someone was a girl I went to high school and middle school with. We still are friends. We just kind of fall out of touch. But she messaged me on Facebook and she just kind of said, "Don't respond to me. Don't respond to this. When you're ready, I would love to chat, but I just want to let you know that I love you and I'm really sorry that this is happening." But she was the only person that had it phrased like that, where it was just like, "Don't respond to this. Don't talk. Don't. When you're ready, I'll be here." And I was just like, that was the most respectful and most loving way someone had ever messaged me about that. And again, it was all within an hour of his death. And I was like, I'm really not going to take any of these calls or these texts. I don't owe it to anyone at this moment. And frankly, y'all are being kind of rude. It's kind of what I had told people, message people back, like, I'm not doing this right now. And then someone did say, "Do you want me to respond to these messages for you or tell people to stop?" And I said, "Yes." And she did that for me, and I was super grateful for that. It's like, I can't do this right now. The helpful things, unfortunately, were a little minimal for me. Again, I just felt really isolated and I felt ignored. And I felt like people didn't really want to talk to me because they couldn't really talk about me without talking about him or what was going on. And I was just like, honestly, and they're like, "Well, is everything okay?" And I'm like, "No, my son's dead." Like, no, he's like in a jar at home. Like, no, I'm not okay. But how was your day? How was work? Let's, like, I don't know. I mean, I felt like he was just kind of shadowing us. And I'm like, makes total sense to me, honestly. But it made it really hard for us to kind of venture past that. It was also hard seeing pregnancy announcements and other people having babies. And again, I sometimes, if I get a little patient that's born in 2021 or born around his birthday, I'm like, this is the size Jasper would be right now. So as I'm treating this little 2.5-year-old, I'm like, oh, so this is how big he would be right now. And sometimes I'll get in the car after putting Jesse in and I'll tell Austin, there should be 2 car seats back here. Or I'll just say, like, I don't know, can you imagine how much harder bath time would be right now if he's having 2 kids in the bath? And I'm just like, there would be so many other things. Like, so there are just moments, especially since having Jesse, I'm like, can you imagine we would have 2? There should be 2 back there at least. So I just kind of always say, like, wow, he's 2.5. This is how big Jasper would have been. And that's, I don't know. That's just, it kind of helps ground me to like say, like this is how old our oldest would be. So when people do ask how many kids we have, I say 2. I just say 2, and that the oldest one passed away. And sometimes they want to get more into that. Sometimes they panic and run away. I mean, people kind of say a lot of stupid things during hard situations like this, where it's just really hard to comprehend a baby dying. It does happen very often, but I feel like unless you really go through it yourself, you have no idea what that would be. So the helpful things, honestly, were people kind of giving me space. Helpful things were, I mean, I'll accept food, yeah, but it was more important to me that people didn't like, I don't know, it felt like some people kind of walk around eggshells around me, or they would say, well, given your bad experience. I was like, my bad experience? My son died. He wasn't a bad experience. He was a person. He was my baby. He was our firstborn. Like, that's not a bad experience. That's a person. That's our baby. And I remember advocating to the state of Iowa asking for a birth or death certificate. I didn't get any kind of like official paperwork of his existence, and they had denied my request. So that was also super unhelpful. Since you're stillborn, I mean, you don't get a birth certificate, but you also don't get a death certificate. So that was difficult to see that email back and say we don't really do that anymore. And I was like, okay, that's fine. So I keep his autopsy records and everything else from him because that's kind of the only paper trail he'll ever have. And with Jesse, I've got all kinds of stuff for him. And but for Jasper, I really just have one manila folder. And okay, and that's never going to be enough for me. I've had so many hurtful things, I feel like, said to me more than to Austin. I feel like they save it all for the mom. So I've had people say, actually this year was one person said, Happy Mother's Day. You couldn't say that last year. And I kind of turned around, I was like, I have been a mother since 2021. I have been able to, this is my second Mother's Day. Third Mother's Day, yeah. I'm like, I have been celebrating this forever. And I don't know, it's just, when they said that, I mean, there's like, well, you couldn't say that last year. It's like, yes, I could. And I don't know. I got to the point where I would just kind of lash out back at that person, or well, like if they would say something, they would say stuff like that all the time. Well, I can't even think of anything right now other than that one time because that just triggered me so bad. There's been so many hurtful things where people have just kind of said, well, you can have another one. And I'm like, I don't really want another one. I want Jasper. I will never have another Jasper. There will never be another one just like Jasper. Or they'll say, well, you're still married. You guys can still have like another one, or you can have, you're still really young. And I'm like, not necessarily. That does not help me, especially struggling with infertility. I'm just like, this has not been easy. And it isn't easy. And people would say, well, have you tried this or that to get pregnant? And I'm like, yeah, I have. And it's just not panning out for me. And they're like, well, they're like, well, you must not need one then. I've had someone say, you must just not have to have another one. And I'm like, I can't accept that as my future. And then I remember someone had asked us, do you have any kids? And I had said no at the time. And she said, oh, well, you might have to just adopt all of them like I did. You look like you should have some by now. And I just had to walk out. I've had this one lady say, my father had been talking about how he wanted like 8 grandkids one day and how he was so excited to be a grandpa soon. And this was way before Jesse's time. So in between Jasper and Jesse, so he was just reminiscing, like, I'm really excited to be a grandfather. And this lady said, no, you don't want to be a grandparent. You're going to have to buy all these things. And then once they grow out of them, you'll have to buy new ones. And it's just a hassle, honestly. You don't want 8 grandkids. And I just had to leave. And then the next day, she came up to me. She's like, I didn't realize that you guys had a loss last year. And I'm like, yeah, we did. And what you said it's super hurtful. And if my father wants 8 grandkids, let him say that. And you should feel fortunate that you get to go shopping in the baby aisle twice. You should just be happy for that. And she's like, I guess I should. I was like, well, yeah, the alternative is all those grandkids you have on your wall will be dead. That's your other alternative. And she had to walk away kind of in tears, and I'm like, I don't really care. Like, it was just like, you really invalidated everyone's experience right then and there. So I feel like I've gotten a little bit easier about just saying, he passed. It's okay. Um, but I mean, the helpful things were really just when people kind of gave us space and just and acknowledged him. I do like to talk about him. It's just sometimes it's hard, and when people don't understand. I mean, I'd love to tell you. I'd love to tell them all about my first son, but I just hate when people kind of minimize him. It's just an experience, I guess.
Well, thank you for sharing. And there's just so many things in there that if you're looking at it from an outside objective view, well, what that person said was instant, and just for some reason it's sticking out of how much harder bath time would be with two. Right? I mean,
Yeah.
and Jesse does not replace Jasper.
No, they're two different kids.
And so while you affirm Jesse is a tremendous blessing, you still mourn Jasper, and just making sure we recognize that. I appreciate your honesty of making sure people just don't ignore Jasper, because it's an uncomfortable topic. I mean, like there's and so I just want to say thank you for sharing and allowing that to allowing your story in Austin and Jasper and even Jesse to impact others. Now I recognize what you went through with Jasper was a really, really big deal. I mean, you talk about everybody has hurts or tragedy. I don't remember exactly what word you used, but very few things, if any, compare to the hurt and the pain from Jasper's death. And so I asked this question not to minimize what you're going through, but I think it can still be hopeful. Do you have any words of encouragement for people who are going through challenges? And I say that recognizing that most challenges aren't even in the same level of the pain that you guys experienced. So do you have any words of encouragement?
One thing that I've thought about, and I've even heard recently, that somebody else said was, it was a story that like a woman came up to the pastor and was saying like where was God when my son died? And the pastor says he was exactly where he was when his own son died, on his throne. And so just like the perspective is God is still in control, and he knows exactly what you've been through. And he's not a God who doesn't sympathize with us, but he like I said, he knows exactly what we went through.
A word of encouragement for those that would be going through a difficult time or the death of a child would be to honestly preserve what you have. Preserve it. I do know that specifically relating to stillborns, if they offer an autopsy, please accept it and take it. You can still have an open casket burial should you want one. We chose cremation, and that actually turned out to be free because that family had also had an infant loss. So Jasper's funeral costs were very minimal. So we were very thankful for that. But I would strongly encourage to get an autopsy that really figure out what is going on so it does not affect future babies as it did for me. Words of encouragement would just be, you never have to do today again. That's one of my favorite quotes. People kind of say, that's kind of like sad. I'm like, no, it's true. You never have to do today again. You're going to have to do tomorrow, because you don't really know what that's going to be, but you never have to do today again. And I really clung to that during like my hard shifts at work. And honestly, with Jasper, like, you don't have to do today again. And I mean, there are days where I'm like, I do want to do that day again. I do. I want to hold him again. I want to see him. And then there are other days where I'm just like, I can't go back. So, and then again, a word of encouragement would just be giving yourself some space. And again, do not make big changes, big permanent changes. I feel like I'm the queen of those. So your life will be easier, I think, if you just sit and wait and breathe it out.
Yeah, giving yourself grace. I think that's important. And sometimes we can be the most harsh on ourselves, and we forget about that. And hopefully you can have friends or support system speak into giving you grace and reminding you of that. Um, but I want to say thank you for sharing
Yeah.
and just allowing your family to impact others. This was, I mean, what you experienced was extremely difficult, and talking about it in this setting isn't necessarily easy. But as you said, you don't want to pretend Jasper didn't exist. I mean, it's he's a child of God, and that he's beautifully and wonderfully made, and 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 while we wish that we had much more time with Jasper, we recognize that he's in the care of his heavenly Father so. But I would say thank you for sharing and just allowing your story to impact others. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this podcast. Be on the lookout for how God does uncommon work in common life, and please subscribe to never miss an episode.